What is going on, comic fans? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Mark. This is Legion of Comics, and today I'm going to be talking about the Sony Spider-Man universe and how we've potentially been lied to, and let's look at the true nature of it. We're going to do all that right after this. Shout out to the homies over at Big Time Collectibles, as well as JustinComicx Cleaning and Pressing, and ABX Comics and Games. Be sure to check out the description of any of my videos to find links to some fantastic comic book resources. And let's get into it. So the truth about Sony, I was thinking, especially recently, since we just got that brand new trailer for the Sony Marvel Kraven the Hunter. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I have not been excited for this film whatsoever. The first trailer was ridiculously underwhelming, even had me kind of laughing a little bit. But that new trailer, while it still looks like it has like a level of campiness to it, it looked pretty solid. It looked action-packed. Rhino looked fantastic. Aaron Taylor Johnson as Kraven looked the part. That obviously is hyper violent. They're leaning into the R rating for this one. I think it has a lot going for it. And it made me think about how many times, especially in the last 2 years, I've seen people just dogging Sony. Like, they can't make a superhero movie. They need to give it up. Give the rights back to Marvel. All sorts of things. There's no credit, no goodwill whatsoever in Sony's direction for making superhero films. And I've talked about this before in live streams, but I thought, what a fantastic idea to actually stop, pause for the cause, and let's check the record. Sony has been making Spider-Man movies since 2002. So we have 22 years, over 2 decades that we can look back on. Now, this video will not have anything to do with the Tom Holland Spider-Man films, as that's a Sony Disney Marvel mashup crossover, but we're going to be looking specifically at the Sony Spider-Man films and see if they do have a good record or if they in fact can't make a good superhero movie. So let's go all the way back to 2002 when we got the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. I decided to go and look at the critics' score for these films, the audience score for these films, the cost, and how much money they made. So Rotten Tomatoes is the source that I use for the critic and audience scores. I know people have their feelings about that, but we're going to go with that just for consistency's sake for this video. So critics gave Spider-Man a 90%, while fans only gave it a 67%. So I do want to go and lay this out there. Rotten Tomatoes was not around in the capacity like it is now back in the day when Spider-Man came out. So a lot of these are people that have gone back and rated them well after the fact. So you don't have any of that initial hype, that initial buzz, that initial excitement that went into it. And a lot of people just don't go back and review old movies like they do when new stuff comes out. 67% for Spider-Man from fans, that's crazy to me. That film is definitely well loved, way beyond that. But needless to say, 90% from the critics is astounding. With a budget of only $139 million, this film brought in $825.9 million, making it a massive success. The old formula you use is you take the budget, you multiply it by 2, and that's the full cost of the film. So even at $140 million, it only needed $280. So that was a massive hit, massive. Then the second Spider-Man came out, arguably in the top 3 greatest superhero films of all time by most people. Like, I have not seen very many people that don't have this in their top 5 lists of all time. 93% from the critics, 82% from the fans, with a budget of $200 million. It brought in $789.7 million. Again, double it. So $400 million, it still brought in hundreds of millions of dollars. Then you get to Spider-Man 3, which this is the first time that we see a rotten review. And it's not even from the critics, but from the fans at 51%. The critics seem to like this not nearly as much as the other, but more than the fans with 63%. With a budget of $250 million, it brought in almost $900 million. Massive, massive hit, the huge moneymaker. So that entire trilogy from 2002 to 2007 knocked it out of the park. Knocked it out of the park. That third one got overbloated. Too many characters, moved too fast. They took Spider-Man 3 and 4 and condensed it down into one. A lot of things were shifting and changing, and it didn't live up to the quality of the first two, but it still was a huge success. And then we had a little break, a little hiatus. Sony borrowing these rights, renting these rights from Marvel. They have to continue making these movies. So they rebooted the franchise in 2012 with Andrew Garfield's The Amazing Spider-Man. Critics gave this one a 71%, while fans are sitting at a 77%, With a budget of $230 million, it brought in $758.4 million. I remember this one very, very well, and a lot of confusion around this one with the changing of the actors, the rebooting of the franchise. It was kind of confusing, and even though they rebooted it not long after the last film, they still got a massive return on investment and an overall like positive response from people. And for me, this was my favorite Spider-Man costume we saw. It looked weird, that rubber-esque material, the yellow eyes. It was wild to see. But then things start to get a little weird at this point, because the sequel to that one, Amazing Spider-Man 2 in 2014, at least it gave us the most comic accurate suit that we saw. It suffered from the same fate that Part 3 did of the Tobey Maguire era. With a 51% from critics. This is our first rotten review from them. 64 from audience, still giving it a passing rating there. It had a reported budget of 250 to 290 million with a box office total of 709. So while it still made a lot of money, it didn't make nearly as much as the other ones. That initial feedback from people, I think, just kind of slowed down the progression at the box office, but still massive hit, still brought in hundreds of millions of dollars all the same. And this is where they really start to get things a little bit weird here. So they start really wanting to expand the Spider-Man world. This is where we start getting into the Spider-Verse, because the next movie that they brought out was none other than Venom in 2018. Well, we have to backtrack, because now Tom Holland started showing up. Between Amazing Spider-Man 2 and before Venom, Tom Holland gets introduced in the MCU, and it kind of throws a monkey wrench in things, and they really start pushing to expand the Spider-Verse. And that's when we got Venom in 2018. Critics hated this one. 30% from critics. Fans loved this one. It was perfect timing. Venom was hot, hot, hot in comics. Donny Cates was doing his thing. People were ready for it. A lot of people love Venom since we grew up with him with the cartoons. Massive hit. With a budget of only $100 million, this juggernaut brought in $856 million bucks. So for me, I didn't enjoy that movie hardly whatsoever. I was not even able to sit through it at all one time. I've tried numerous times to watch it. There's some cool action scenes, but it's just not the Venom I'm used to. I'm like that street level Venom kind of guy. But you can't argue that the overwhelming majority of fans loved that film. And it was a massive, massive hit. That is insanity. So far, they haven't had a financial loss in the entire bunch. And then we expand into the Spider-Verse a little bit further with Miles Morales in 2018 with Into the Spider-Verse. 97% from critics, 94% from fans. Everyone leaves this movie just absolutely rattled to their core in the best ways possible. We have a late appearance of Stan Lee right after his death. It was an emotional ride from start to finish. Budget of only $90 million brought in $384 million for an animated film introducing a character for the first time like this. Huge, massive success, insane success. And then while all these are coming out, Tom Holland's still doing his thing, and stuff gets a little bit weirder at this point. Now, this is a lockdown victim right here. This movie was finished production throughout the whole pandemic and everything, and it was one of the first films to release once theaters would show new films. And in 2021, we got Venom: Let There Be Carnage. While it rated higher than the first Venom movie substantially with 57%, the fans give this one a higher rating to it, 84%. Now, that's crazy to me. I feel like my experience was most people I talked to didn't like this one as much. But based off the fan reviews and the critic score, this one was an improvement on the first one. With a slightly higher budget of $110, it brought in substantially less at $506, but still hundreds of millions of dollars of profit. Insane how much money these movies are making. They have a fair budget, and they're crushing it. And that's a pandemic movie, over $500 million. Like most people weren't even going back out to cinemas at that time. I can't even imagine what that movie would have done had it been just a normal release. Now things get super weird. You get into the odd characters at this point. We get into Dr. Michael Morbius getting his own movie, The Living Vampire. And this one was in 2022, the second lowest rated by critics at 15%. This one kind of got a cult internet following where people were just clowning on it so hard. People got curious to see it and everything. And fans even gave it a 71%. I watched it. It felt like a movie from the early 2000s. It was a movie really out of its time, but can be enjoyed if you don't take it serious, or too serious at least. Budgeted at $75 million, it barely squeaked out a profit with $167.5 million at the box office. So that one only a few $million, but millions is millions. So this when we get another high point with Across the Spider-Verse in 2023, 95 by the critics, 94 by the fans, a budget of 100 million, and an insane box office return of 690.9 million, almost 700 million dollars. Massive hit, absolutely crushed it. And then we go from any high, you have to hit an all-time low. And this is just Sony experimenting with the brand. They're so used to winning left and right. They don't know what else to do. Let's make a Madam Web movie. And this year, 2024, with the lowest critics ratings by any Sony Spider-Man property of 11%, and the second lowest fan rating, because believe it or not, Spider-Man 3 clocked in at 51% by the fans and Madam Web at 57%. That's wild to me. I'm not sure how it got 57%. This is literally one of the worst movies I've seen in my life. But again, I watched it going in knowing it was going to be, and had somewhat of a fun experience checking it out. With a budget of 80 million, this is the only Sony Spider-Man film to not turn a profit. With $100 million at the box office, this one here lost approximately $60 million for them. Out of 11 films, there's only 2 that were negatively reviewed overall by the fans, and only 5 that were negatively reviewed by the critics, with only 1 being a financial failure out of 11. I think Sony knows what they're doing. So I'm curious. I want to know from you. Leave me a comment. Do you think Sony knows what they're doing with these characters? Do you think that they should give up on the characters? Did you think that they've lost the plot with all this? Because in my mind, these people have been printing money for over 2 decades. And that's not even talking about the Marvel agreement. They're getting paid for Tom Holland. Not talking about the video games, which I don't video game, but I hear people tell me all the time that the Sony Spider-Man 4 or whatever for PS4 and the new one where they introduced Miles are phenomenal games and some of the best representations of Spider-Man's rogues gallery. And with Spider-Man having the most iconic villains outside of Batman, of course there's a potential to make some movies with his villains, his rogues. Venoms are a hit. We have Venom: The Last Dance coming out in a handful of months. It'll be the finale to that. Guarantee you that is a financial success. And then Kraven the Hunter. I'm not sure what the budget is on that. I didn't go into this video checking all that, but I'll be there for that. I'm actually excited to check that one out now. Leave me a comment. I don't know what everyone thinks. Do you think, did you assume Sony is just making bad movies and losing money? Is that what you thought? Because that's what the internet would have you believe. And it's just patently false. Sony is absolutely crushing it, save for 1 movie. So it looks like they know what they're doing. They got an audience. I think if they take a little bit of lesson from Morbius and Madam Web and keep things a little bit tighter focus. And I don't know, something went wrong with the creator on Madam Web there, and Morbius was just an oddball. That's just too obscure of a character to really be too successful, I think. I don't know. Blade succeeded, and he's a vampire hunter. So crisscross them in a movie, problem solved. But I'm definitely curious to hear what everyone else thinks. I thought this would just be a fun video to look back on all of this stuff. A lot of us grew up going to the theater to see all these from day one. So I know I did. I've seen all of these in the movie theater except for Madam. Yeah, I watched Madam Web. Morbius, that's the one I watched on Netflix. So like I don't get it. I don't know where that whole like Sony doesn't know what they're doing thing comes from. It's bananas. The internet will try to rewrite history in a heartbeat. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Keep the conversation going. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And until next time, as always, I'm Mark, but we are Legion.